My wife Serenity came home crying, claiming she'd lost our baby. She threw herself into my arms, sobbing about how devastated she was, begging me not to leave her during this tragic time. For 3 months I comforted her through her supposed grief, watched her tear up whenever she saw baby clothes in stores, and even attended grief counseling sessions with her. The whole time she was putting on the performance of her lifetime. But here's the thing, I knew she was lying. I'd seen the negative pregnancy test she'd thrown away weeks before her dramatic announcement. I'd watched her practice her crying face in the bathroom mirror. I even caught her Googling miscarriage symptoms on her phone. So why didn't I call her out immediately? Because I wanted to see exactly how far my cheating wife would go to manipulate me into staying in our crumbling marriage. What I discovered shocked even me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Darius Corvell, and I used to believe I had the perfect marriage. Serenity and I met during our final year at Stanford Business School. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had this infectious laugh that could light up any room. We both landed prestigious positions after graduation. Me as a senior analyst at Blackstone Financial in downtown San Francisco, and her as a marketing director at Nexus Digital, one of the fastest growing tech startups in Silicon Valley. Our wedding was the kind of event people still talk about 5 years later. We exchanged vows at the historic Fairmont Hotel overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, with 200 of our closest friends and family members in attendance. Serenity looked absolutely radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, and I genuinely believed I was the luckiest man alive. We bought a stunning craftsman-style home in the prestigious Presidio Heights neighborhood, complete with a wraparound porch and a view of the bay that took your breath away. Life seemed perfect. I was pulling in 6 figures, analyzing investment portfolios for high-net-worth clients, while Serenity was making waves in the tech world, with her innovative marketing campaigns. But perfection, as I learned, is often just an expertly crafted illusion. The first crack in our marriage appeared during our 3rd year. Serenity started working late more frequently, claiming her startup was preparing for a major product launch. She'd come home exhausted, barely speaking during dinner, and would immediately retreat to her home office to continue working. When I suggested we take a weekend getaway to Napa Valley to reconnect, she dismissed it, saying she couldn't possibly take time off during such a critical period. I tried to be understanding. The tech industry is notoriously demanding, and I knew how much her career meant to her. But something felt different. The woman who used to greet me with enthusiastic kisses and stories about her day had become distant and distracted. Our conversations became superficial, limited to discussions about grocery lists and bill payments. Then came the phone calls, late-night conversations that she claimed were with overseas clients, requiring her to step outside or into another room for better reception. When I questioned the frequency of these calls, she became defensive, accusing me of being controlling and not supporting her ambitions. The real turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening in November. I'd come home early from work, hoping to surprise Serenity with her favorite Thai takeout from our usual spot on Union Street. As I approached our front door, I could hear her voice through the window, not the professional tone she used for business calls, but something softer, more intimate. "I miss you too," she was saying. "I wish I could just leave right now and be with you." My heart stopped. I stood frozen on our porch, Thai food growing cold in my hands, as I listened to my wife speaking to someone in a way she hadn't spoken to me in months. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, filled with whispered endearments and promises to see each other soon. When she finally ended the call, and I entered the house, Serenity acted completely normal. She thanked me for the food, chatted about her day at the office, and even suggested we watch a movie together. But I couldn't shake what I'd heard. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how long this had been going on. Over the next few weeks, I became hyper-aware of every detail. I noticed how she guarded her phone, taking it with her even to the bathroom. I observed how she'd suddenly developed an interest in going to the gym 3 times a week, coming home with perfectly styled hair, and subtle makeup that suggested she'd freshened up somewhere. There were new clothes appearing in her wardrobe, sexier outfits that she claimed were necessary for important client meetings. The most telling sign was her behavior toward me. She became overly affectionate in public, posting photos of us on social media, with captions about being blessed with the most amazing husband. But in private, she was increasingly cold and critical. She'd find fault with everything from how I loaded the dishwasher, to my choice of weekend activities. I considered confronting her multiple times, but something held me back. Maybe it was denial, or perhaps I was gathering evidence before making any accusations. Looking back, I think I was already preparing myself for the possibility that our marriage was over. The breaking point came during the week before Christmas. Serenity announced that her company was hosting a holiday party at the exclusive Ritz-Carlton in downtown San Francisco, and she wanted me to attend as her +1. I was actually excited. It had been months since we'd done anything social together. The party was everything you'd expect from a tech startup flush with venture capital money. Open bar, gourmet catering, and a DJ spinning the latest hits. Serenity looked stunning, in a black cocktail dress that hugged her curves perfectly. For the first hour, we mingled together, and I started to hope that maybe we could work through whatever issues we were having. Then I saw him. Lucian Tharos was everything I wasn't. Tall, athletic build, with the kind of rugged good looks that belonged on magazine covers. He worked as Nexus Digital's creative director, and it was obvious from the moment our eyes met that he knew exactly who I was. More importantly, I could see in his expression that he knew what had been going on between him and my wife. Throughout the evening, I watched their interactions with the scrutiny of a private investigator. The way they carefully avoided being in the same conversations, yet somehow always ended up near each other. How Serenity's face would light up whenever he entered her field of vision. The subtle touches they exchanged when they thought no one was looking. By the end of the night, I had no doubt that my wife was having an affair with Lucian Tharos. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The confrontation I'd been dreading came sooner than expected, but not in the way I'd imagined. 3 days after the holiday party, I decided to work from home to catch up on some portfolio analyses that required uninterrupted focus. Serenity left for the office at her usual time, kissing me goodbye with what I now recognized as performative affection. Around 10 in the morning, I was deep in spreadsheets when I heard a car pull into our driveway. Assuming it was a delivery driver, I continued working. But then I heard Serenity's distinctive laugh echoing from our front yard. Curious, I moved to the living room window and peered through the blinds. What I saw made my blood run cold. Serenity was getting out of a sleek black Tesla that definitely wasn't her white BMW. Behind the wheel sat Lucian Tharos, and the way they were looking at each other left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They weren't just colleagues sharing a ride to work. I watched as they lingered by the car, Serenity leaning against the passenger door, while Lucian spoke to her through the open window. She was wearing the same clothes she'd left in that morning, but something was different. Her hair was messed up in a way that suggested intimate activity, and there was a glow about her that I hadn't seen in months. After what felt like an eternity, Lucian drove away, and Serenity walked toward our front door. I quickly returned to my home office, pretending to be absorbed in my work when she entered the house. "Darius?" she called out. "I thought you were going to the office today." "Changed my mind," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Needed some quiet time to focus on these reports. She appeared in my office doorway, and I could see she was nervous. "I forgot some important documents," she explained. "Just came back to grab them quickly." It was obviously a lie. She spent the next 15 minutes moving around the house, opening and closing drawers, clearly buying time to come up with a better story. Finally, she announced she had to get back to work and would see me that evening. That afternoon marked the beginning of my transformation from trusting husband to private investigator. I started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. I noticed that our credit card statements showed charges at restaurants during times when Serenity claimed to be working late at the office. There were purchases at boutique hotels in nearby Sausalito and Napa Valley, on days when she said she was attending business conferences. The evidence was mounting, but I still wasn't ready to confront her directly. Something inside me needed absolute proof before I could accept that the woman I'd vowed to love forever had been systematically betraying me. That proof came in the form of a mistake that changed everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. One evening in early January, Serenity left her laptop open on our kitchen counter while she took a shower. She'd always been paranoid about her devices, never leaving them unattended, and always closing applications when she finished using them. But this time, in her haste to wash off what I now suspected were traces of another man, she'd forgotten. I knew I was crossing a line, but I couldn't stop myself. I opened her email application, and found what I'd been dreading, months of correspondence with Lucien, that read like something out of a romance novel. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. The emails revealed that their relationship had started 6 months earlier during a company retreat in Lake Tahoe. What began as professional collaboration had quickly evolved into something much more intimate. They wrote about being soulmates, about how they'd never experienced love like this before, and about their dreams of starting a new life together. The most devastating email was dated just 2 weeks earlier. In it, Serenity wrote, "I know I need to tell Darius soon. I can't keep living this lie, pretending to be happy in a marriage that feels more like a business arrangement every day. You make me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible." Lucien's response was equally crushing. "I hate watching you go home to him every night. When you're ready to leave, I'll be here. We can start over in Portland, or Denver, or anywhere you want. Just us, building something real together." I closed the laptop and sat in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the life we'd built together. Wedding photos smiled down at me from the walls, mocking reminders of promises that apparently meant nothing. The granite countertops we'd spent weeks selecting, the custom cabinets we'd designed together, the expensive espresso machine Serenity had insisted we needed. All of it felt like props in a play, where I was the only actor who didn't know the script had changed. When Serenity emerged from the shower, wrapped in the fluffy white robe I'd given her for our anniversary, she found me sitting at the kitchen island, with a glass of wine. "You're home early," she observed, toweling her hair dry. "Finished everything I needed to do," I replied, studying her face for any sign of guilt or remorse. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing her usual evening herbal tea. "How was your day? You seem quiet." This was my moment. I could have confronted her right then, could have ended the charade, and demanded an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice, or perhaps some misguided hope that she would confess on her own. Instead, I chose a different path. "Just thinking about us," I said carefully. "About where we're headed." Serenity paused in her tea preparation, her back still turned to me. "What do you mean? I feel like we've been drifting apart lately. I'm wondering if we should consider couples therapy, or maybe plan a romantic getaway. Something to reconnect." When she turned to face me, I saw something flicker across her features. Was it panic, guilt, or simply annoyance at having to maintain her performance a little longer? "That sounds nice," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Things have been stressful at work lately. Once this current project wraps up, maybe we can plan something." It was the same excuse she'd been using for months, and we both knew it. But I nodded, as if I believed her, as if I hadn't just read about her plans to abandon our marriage for a new life with Lucien Theros. That night, as she slept beside me, I made a decision that would define the next phase of my life. Instead of confronting her immediately, I would wait and watch. I would document everything, gather irrefutable evidence, and see exactly how far she would go to deceive me. I had no idea that her next move would be so calculating, so manipulative, that it would forever change how I viewed human nature itself. The weeks following my discovery of the emails transformed me into someone I barely recognized. By day, I maintained the facade of the devoted husband, going through the motions of our routine while secretly documenting every inconsistency in Serenity's behavior. By night, I lay awake analyzing every conversation, every gesture, looking for clues about what she would do next. I didn't have to wait long. On a foggy February morning, Serenity announced over breakfast that she had exciting news. Her face was glowing with an emotion I initially mistook for genuine happiness, until I remembered that nothing about our relationship was genuine anymore. "Darius, I'm pregnant," she said, reaching across our dining table to take my hand. For a moment my world stopped. Despite everything I knew about her affair, despite the emails I'd read, a small part of me wanted to believe this could be our new beginning. Maybe the baby would change everything. Maybe she would end things with Lucian, and we could rebuild our marriage. But then I noticed details that shattered that fleeting hope. She was watching my reaction too carefully, as if gauging whether her performance was convincing. There was something rehearsed about her delivery, and when I pulled her into what should have been a celebratory embrace, her body felt tense rather than relaxed. "That's incredible news," I managed to say, my mind racing. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday afternoon," she replied. "I'd been feeling nauseous for a few days, and decided to take a test during my lunch break. I wanted to wait until I was sure before telling you." The timeline bothered me. If she'd taken the test yesterday afternoon, why hadn't she shared the news immediately when she came home? Serenity had never been able to keep secrets about happy events. She was the type of person who would wake me up at midnight to share good news. Over the following days, I watched her carefully. She began exhibiting textbook pregnancy symptoms with suspicious precision. Morning sickness that conveniently occurred when I was around to witness it. Sudden aversions to food she'd always enjoyed. Fatigue that required her to rest frequently. Usually when I might have been inclined to suggest we spend time together. But the symptoms seemed almost too perfect, too medically accurate. It reminded me of how she used to prepare for important client presentations, researching every possible question, and rehearsing her responses until they sounded natural. My suspicions crystallized when I came home unexpectedly one afternoon to find her researching pregnancy symptoms on her laptop. She quickly closed the browser when she heard me enter, claiming she was reading about healthy foods for expectant mothers. But I'd glimpsed enough of the screen to see she was actually on a medical website reading about early pregnancy signs and symptoms. The most damning evidence came when I decided to do some investigating of my own. I waited until Serenity left for one of her extended work meetings and searched our bathroom thoroughly. If she was really pregnant, there should be evidence somewhere. Mature pregnancy tests, prenatal vitamins, appointment cards from her doctor. I found nothing. Instead, hidden in the back of her jewelry box, I discovered something that made my stomach turn. It was a negative pregnancy test, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. The date on the packaging indicated it was purchased the day before her big announcement, and the test window clearly showed a single line, "Mature negative." She had lied about being pregnant, but why? The answer came to me as I stood in our bathroom, holding the evidence of her deception. She knew I was becoming suspicious about her affair. The pregnancy announcement was a strategic move, designed to keep me from confronting her while she figured out her exit strategy. But if that was true, what was her endgame? I got my answer 2 weeks later, when I overheard another phone conversation. This time, I didn't accidentally stumble upon it. I deliberately positioned myself where I could listen when I saw Lucian's name pop up on her phone screen. "I know it's complicated," she was saying in hushed tones, "but the pregnancy gives us time to plan properly. Darius will never suspect anything while he thinks we're starting a family together." There was a pause as Lucian responded, then Serenity continued, "I just need a few more months to figure out the finances. My lawyer says I'll get a much better settlement if we can prove the marriage was stable when it ended. Having a baby would help with that narrative." My hands were shaking as I processed what I was hearing. She wasn't just planning to leave me, Mitcher, she was orchestrating an elaborate deception to maximize her financial gain from our divorce. The fake pregnancy was part of a calculated strategy to portray herself as the victim of a marriage that had fallen apart through no fault of her own. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Don't worry about the pregnancy complication," she told Lucian. "I'll handle that when the time is right. A miscarriage in the second trimester would be perfect timing. Darius will be so devastated and guilty about not being supportive enough that he'll agree to whatever settlement terms I propose." I had to grip the wall to steady myself. She was planning to fake a miscarriage. Not only was she lying about being pregnant, but she was already plotting to stage the traumatic loss of our supposed baby to manipulate me emotionally during divorce proceedings. The woman I had married, the woman I had loved and trusted for 5 years, was capable of a level of manipulation that was truly sociopathic. Over the next month, I watched Serenity's performance with a mixture of fascination and horror. She scheduled fake doctor's appointments, claiming each visit showed that everything was progressing normally. She started showing me pregnancy apps on her phone, pointing out how our baby was developing week by week. She even suggested we start looking at cribs and planning the nursery. The most disturbing part was how good she was at it. If I hadn't discovered the negative pregnancy test, I would have believed every moment of her act. She had researched not just the physical symptoms, but the emotional aspects of pregnancy as well. She spoke convincingly about feeling connected to our growing baby, about her hopes and dreams for our family's future. Meanwhile, her affair with Lucian continued unabated. The emails between them revealed that they were now openly planning their life together in Portland, where Lucian had been offered a position with a prestigious advertising agency. They discussed which neighborhood they wanted to live in, what kind of house they would buy, and how they would explain their relationship to their new colleagues. In one particularly cruel email, Serenity wrote, "Darius has been so sweet about the pregnancy. He keeps talking about teaching our son to play baseball and taking family camping trips. I almost feel bad about what I'm going to put him through." Almost. Lucian's response showed he was equally callous. "He sounds like a nice enough guy, but he's standing in the way of our happiness. Whatever you need to do to get out of that marriage cleanly, I'll support you. We deserve our chance at real love." As I read their correspondence night after night, I began to understand that this wasn't just about an affair gone wrong. This was about two people who had convinced themselves that their happiness justified any amount of deception and emotional cruelty toward others. But they had made one crucial mistake: they had underestimated me. While Serenity was busy planning her fake miscarriage and calculating her divorce settlement, I was making plans of my own. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in high-net-worth divorces, explaining the situation without revealing the full extent of my knowledge. I started documenting everything, printing emails, photographing evidence, creating a timeline of her deceptions. Most importantly, I decided that I wouldn't just be a passive victim in their scheme. If Serenity wanted to perform the tragedy of losing our baby, I would let her. But I would be watching every moment, documenting every lie, preparing for the confrontation that would inevitably come. I was no longer the trusting husband who could be manipulated by tears and false remorse. I had become something much more dangerous to their plans, a man who knew the truth and was willing to wait for the perfect moment to reveal it. The stage was set for the most elaborate deception of my marriage, and I had a front-row seat to watch my wife's Oscar-worthy performance of grief for a baby that had never existed. The performance began on a rainy Tuesday morning in late March. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly reports when I heard Serenity's blood-curdling scream from the bathroom. It was the kind of sound that makes your heart stop, a cry of pure anguish that would have sent any normal husband running to help. But I wasn't a normal husband anymore. I was a man who knew exactly what was happening. I gave her 30 seconds to compose herself before I rushed upstairs, making sure to sound appropriately panicked. "Serenity, what's wrong?" I found her sitting on the bathroom floor, her silk pajamas stained with what appeared to be blood. Her face was a masterpiece of devastation, tears streaming down her cheeks, her entire body shaking with what looked like genuine shock and grief. "Darius," she gasped, reaching for me with trembling hands. "Something's wrong. There's so much blood. I think I'm losing the baby." The blood, I realized, was likely from the small vial of theatrical blood I'd noticed hidden in her makeup bag weeks earlier. She'd probably pricked her finger or used some other method to create the appearance of a miscarriage. The attention to detail was impressive, even if the morality behind it was reprehensible. "Oh God," I said, dropping to my knees beside her and pulling her into my arms. "We need to get you to the hospital right now." "I'm scared," she whispered against my chest, and for a moment her acting was so convincing that I almost forgot this was all an elaborate lie. "What if we lose our baby?" The drive to San Francisco General Hospital was 20 minutes of pure theater. Serenity clutched my hand while maintaining a steady stream of panicked questions and self-blame. She wondered aloud if she'd been working too hard, if the stress from her job had caused this, if there was something she could have done differently. I played my part perfectly, offering reassurance while secretly marveling at her commitment to the deception. She had researched every aspect of pregnancy loss, from the physical symptoms to the emotional responses. Every tear seemed genuine, every fear appeared authentic. At the hospital, she continued her performance for the medical staff. The emergency room doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, conducted an ultrasound while Serenity gripped my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I'm sorry," Dr. Chen said gently, turning the monitor away from us. "There's no heartbeat. Based on what I'm seeing, it appears you've experienced a complete miscarriage at approximately 12 weeks. The sound that came from Serenity's throat was haunting Doctor's throat, was haunting Doctor, a keening wail of grief that filled the sterile examination room. She turned her face into my shoulder and sobbed with such intensity that even I began to feel moved by her performance. For the next 3 hours, I watched my wife convince an entire medical team that she had just lost our baby. She answered every question with the perfect mixture of grief and confusion. She accepted condolences from nurses with heartbreaking grace. She even asked about planning a memorial service, claiming she needed something to help her process the loss. The most disturbing moment came when Dr. Chen offered to let us see the ultrasound images. Serenity nodded through her tears and stared at the blank screen with such convincing sorrow that I wondered if she had somehow convinced herself that the pregnancy had been real. "Can we have a copy of the pictures?" she asked in a broken voice. "I know it might seem strange, but I want something to remember our baby by." Dr. Chen's eyes filled with sympathy as she printed out the ultrasound images of nothing. Of course, many parents find that having something tangible helps with the grieving process. As we left the hospital, Serenity clutched those blank ultrasound images like they were precious artifacts. She had obtained physical proof of her fictional tragedy, documentation that she could use to support her narrative for months to come. The following weeks were a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Serenity threw herself into her role as the grieving mother with dedication that would have impressed method actors. She created a small memorial corner in our bedroom with the ultrasound images, a tiny pair of yellow baby shoes she'd purchased online, and a sympathy card from her mother. She attended grief counseling sessions, both alone and with me, where she spoke movingly about her loss and her fears about trying to conceive again. The therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, was completely taken in by her performance, offering gentle guidance about processing trauma and rebuilding emotional intimacy in our marriage. But I was watching everything with the detached fascination of an anthropologist studying a particularly clever predator. I noted how she would manufacture tears at precisely the right moments, how she had memorized all the stages of grief and performed them in textbook order. She even researched support groups for couples who had experienced pregnancy loss and suggested we attend together. The most chilling moment came during one of our counseling sessions, when Dr. Rodriguez asked how the miscarriage had affected our marriage. "It's brought us closer together," Serenity said, reaching for my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. "Darius has been so supportive through this difficult time. I don't know what I would have done without him." She looked at me with such convincing love and gratitude that for a split second I almost forgot she was planning to divorce me and run away with her lover. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She was using our fake tragedy to praise me for being the supportive husband she was preparing to betray. Meanwhile, her correspondence with Lucian continued unabated. If anything, the fake miscarriage had accelerated their timeline. In her emails, she wrote about how the experience had shown her what was truly important in life, and how she couldn't waste any more time in a loveless marriage. "The miscarriage was harder than I expected," she wrote to Lucian. "Not because of losing the baby, obviously, but because of how guilty I feel watching Darius grieve for something that never existed. He's been so kind and supportive that I almost feel bad about what comes next." Almost. Lucian's response revealed his own sociopathic tendencies. "You're doing what you have to do to secure your future, our future. Don't let temporary guilt derail the plan we've worked so hard to put in place. A few more months of this performance, and then we can start our real life together." 3 months into her grief performance, I decided it was time to end the charade. I had documented everything: minds, the emails, the fake blood, the researched symptoms, the staged conversations. I had consulted with my lawyer and prepared for every possible scenario. Most importantly, I had finally reached my emotional breaking point. The confrontation came on a quiet Sunday evening in June. Serenity was in our living room, arranged artfully on the sofa with the fake ultrasound images spread before her. When I walked in carrying a manila folder containing printed copies of every email she'd exchanged with Lucien. "We need to talk," I said, setting the folder on our coffee table. Something in my tone must have alerted her to danger, because her carefully composed expression of melancholy shifted slightly. "What about your pregnancy?" I replied, sitting down across from her. "And your miscarriage? And your plans to move to Portland with Lucien Theros?" The transformation was instantaneous and complete. The mask of grief she'd worn for months simply evaporated, replaced by the cold, calculating expression of someone who had just realized their carefully constructed lives were crumbling around them. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I opened the folder and began laying out printed emails on the table between us, like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. March 15th. The pregnancy gives us time to plan properly. March 22nd. A miscarriage in the second trimester would be perfect timing. April 3rd. Darius will be so devastated and guilty that he'll agree to whatever settlement terms I propose. With each email I revealed, Serenity's composure cracked a little more. By the time I reached the most recent correspondence, where she discussed their plans to be married in Portland by Christmas, she had gone completely pale. "You've been reading my private emails," she said, but even this accusation sounded hollow. "I've been documenting the systematic destruction of our marriage," I corrected. "The fake pregnancy, the staged miscarriage, the grief counseling sessions where you lied to professionals who were trying to help us heal from a tragedy that never happened." I reached into the folder and pulled out the negative pregnancy test I'd found in her jewelry box. "This is from the day before you announced your pregnancy. Negative, just like the 3 others I found hidden in various places around our house." Serenity stared at the test as if it were a venomous snake. "You went through my personal things. You faked a miscarriage to manipulate me into a favorable divorce settlement," I replied. "I think my invasion of privacy pales in comparison to your complete fabrication of human tragedy." For a long moment, we sat in silence. The evidence of her deception spread between us like the ruins of our marriage. Then slowly something changed in Serenity's expression. The panic and denial faded, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "I suspected the affair for months," I replied. "I've known about the fake pregnancy since the day you announced it, and you said nothing. It wasn't a question. I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to understand exactly who I married." I leaned forward, studying her face. "Tell me, Serenity's, when you were sitting in those grief counseling sessions, talking about our dead baby, did you feel anything at all? Any guilt? Any shame? Any recognition that what you were doing was monstrous?" She considered the question seriously, tilting her head as if she were analyzing her own motivations. "I felt inconvenienced," she said finally. "The grief performance was exhausting, and I kept worrying that I would slip up and reveal something that would compromise the plan." Her honesty was more shocking than any lie could have been. She wasn't even attempting to justify her actions or express remorse. She was simply stating facts about her experience of manipulating me through fake tragedy. "So what now?" she asked as casually as if we were discussing dinner plans. "Now we get divorced," I said, "but not on your terms. You're going to walk away from this marriage with exactly what you brought into it, and not 1 penny more. And if you try to contest that arrangement, every email, every piece of evidence of your fraud will become public record." For the first time since I'd started revealing her deception, Serenity looked genuinely concerned. "You wouldn't try me," I said, standing up and gathering the papers scattered across our coffee table. "You have 24 hours to move out of this house. After that you can communicate with me only through lawyers." As I walked toward the door, she called after me, "Darius, wait, we can work this out. She can go back to how things were before." I turned back to look at the woman I had once loved more than life itself, now revealed as someone capable of weaponizing human tragedy for personal gain. "Serenity," I said, "there is no coming back from this. You didn't just betray our marriage, you perverted the very concept of loss and grief for your own selfish ends. That's not something you work out in counseling. That's something you live with for the rest of your life." The last thing I saw before leaving the room was her sitting alone among the fake ultrasound images and fraudulent evidence of her performance, finally forced to confront the reality of who she had become. Serenity didn't leave within 24 hours. Instead, she launched what I can only describe as a desperate counter-offensive, designed to salvage some version of her original plan. The morning after our confrontation, I woke to find her in our kitchen, fully dressed in a conservative navy suit, sitting at our breakfast table with her laptop open and papers scattered around her. "I've been thinking about everything you said last night," she began, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she used during business negotiations. "Maybe we can reach a mutually beneficial arrangement without involving lawyers." I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter, studying her. The grief-stricken woman from the previous months had been replaced by the sharp, calculating professional I'd originally fallen in love with. It was like watching someone remove an elaborate costume. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, curious to see what strategy she would attempt next. "I'll admit the pregnancy situation got out of hand," she said, carefully avoiding the words fake or lie. "But you have to understand, I was scared about our marriage falling apart. I thought if we had something to focus on together, we could work through our problems." The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to reframe her elaborate deception as a misguided attempt to save our marriage, rather than a calculated scheme to maximize her divorce settlement. "And Lucian Theros," I prompted. She had the grace to look uncomfortable for a moment. "That was a mistake. A temporary lapse in judgment during a difficult period in our marriage. But it's over now. I've already told him that I'm committed to working things out with you." This was news to me, and I suspected it was news to Lucian as well. I made a mental note to check whether she had actually contacted him or if this was another fabrication designed to buy her time. "I appreciate your newfound commitment to honesty," I said, "but my position hasn't changed. You have until this evening to collect your belongings and leave." What followed was a masterclass in escalating desperation. Over the next 8 hours, Serenity cycled through every manipulation tactic in her considerable arsenal. She tried tears, anger, bargaining threats, and even seduction. She called her mother, who then called me to plead Serenity's case, claiming that young marriages went through rough patches and that I was being unreasonably harsh. She contacted our mutual friends, spinning a version of events where I had discovered some text messages that I'd blown out of proportion, and now I was threatening divorce over a harmless workplace friendship. Several people called me throughout the day, urging me to reconsider and attend couples counseling. The most disturbing call came from Dr. Rodriguez, our grief counselor, who had apparently been contacted by Serenity, with concerns about my mental state following our pregnancy loss. Rodriguez gently suggested that I might be displacing my grief about the miscarriage onto anger towards Serenity, and that this was a common but treatable response to reproductive trauma. I listened to these well-meaning interventions with a mixture of amazement and disgust. Even in defeat, Serenity was weaponizing our fake tragedy, using the fictional miscarriage to paint me as an unstable husband who couldn't cope with loss. The fact that she was manipulating a mental health professional who had tried to help us heal from her fabricated trauma was particularly vile. By evening, when she finally accepted that I wouldn't budge, Serenity's mask slipped completely. "You're going to regret this," she said as she loaded suitcases into her car. "I know things about your business dealings that could destroy your reputation. I have access to your client files, your financial records. You think you can humiliate me and walk away clean? Feel free to try," I replied calmly. "But remember that everything you just said was recorded on my phone, and threatening to expose confidential client information is a felony in California. Add that to the healthcare fraud charges you could face for your hospital performance, and I think you'll find that your leverage is limited." The look she gave me in that moment was pure hatred, unfiltered by any pretense of love or remorse. This was who she really was underneath all the performances and manipulations. Someone who viewed other people as obstacles to be overcome, or tools to be used. 3 weeks later, I learned about the immediate consequences of her exposure when Lucian Theros contacted me directly. He called my office on a Thursday afternoon, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Mr. Corvell, this is Lucian Theros. I think we need to talk." We met at a coffee shop in the Marina District, and I was shocked by his appearance. The confident, charismatic man I'd seen at the holiday party had been replaced by someone who looked haunted and exhausted. "She lied to me too," were his first words. "About everything. The pregnancy, the miscarriage, even her plans to leave you. I found out she was still married when I saw your divorce filing in the public records." It turned out that Serenity had told Lucian a completely different story about our marriage. According to her version, we had been separated for over a year, and were only maintaining appearances until after the holidays for family reasons. She claimed the pregnancy was from our final attempt at reconciliation that had failed, and that I was the one who wanted the divorce. "I never would have gotten involved if I'd known the truth," Lucian said, staring into his coffee cup. "I thought I was helping someone escape a bad marriage, not destroying a good one." The irony wasn't lost on me that Serenity had manipulated both of us, just in different ways, and for different purposes. Lucian had been as much a victim of her deceptions as I had been, although his conscience seemed more intact than hers. "She's been calling me constantly since she moved out," he continued, "begging me to take her back, saying that you forced her to choose, and she chose wrong. But now that I know what she's capable of, I can't trust anything she says." The divorce proceedings moved swiftly once my lawyer presented the evidence of Serenity's fraud. Her attorney, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen, took one look at the emails and fake pregnancy documentation and advised Serenity to accept my terms immediately, rather than risk a trial that would make her deceptions part of the public record. In the end, Serenity left our marriage with exactly what she had brought into it: her personal belongings, her car, and her 401k. The house, our joint savings, and even the expensive artwork we had collected together remained with me. More importantly, she was required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from discussing our marriage publicly or contacting any of our mutual friends or business associates. The final insult came when Nexus Digital quietly terminated her employment 3 months later. Word of her personal scandals had reached the executive team, and they decided her presence was becoming a liability for company morale. Her carefully constructed professional reputation, built over years of strategic networking and successful campaigns, crumbled in a matter of weeks. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Serenity had moved to Seattle and was working as a freelance marketing consultant. Lucian had taken the position in Portland, but was reportedly single and focused on rebuilding his career reputation. The fake pregnancy and miscarriage had destroyed more than just our marriage. It had revealed the kind of person she truly was to everyone in her professional and personal circle. The very manipulation she had designed to secure her future had instead ensured that she would spend years trying to recover from its consequences. 2 years have passed since that confrontation in our living room, and I'm writing this from my new home office in a restored Victorian house in Pacific Heights. The morning fog is rolling in from the bay, and I can hear the distant sound of the cable cars beginning their daily journey through the city streets. It's a peaceful life, one that I've built deliberately and carefully from the ground up. The house itself represents everything I've learned about starting over. Instead of buying something massive and impressive to prove my success, I chose a smaller place with character and history. The previous owners had restored the original hardwood floors and crown molding, but I've added my own touches. A reading nook by the bay window, a kitchen designed for someone who actually enjoys cooking, and a small garden where I've discovered an unexpected talent for growing herbs and vegetables. My work life has flourished in ways I never anticipated. After the divorce, I made the decision to leave Blackstone Financial and start my own wealth management firm. Corvell Capital Management now serves 35 high-net-worth clients who appreciate my direct, no-nonsense approach to financial planning. The business has grown entirely through referrals, built on a reputation for honesty and strategic thinking that feels especially meaningful, given what I've been through. The most significant change, however, has been in how I approach relationships. I'm dating again, something I thought would be impossible after Serenity's betrayal. Her name is Dr. Isabel Morrison, and she's a pediatric surgeon at UCSF, with an infectious laugh and zero tolerance for games or manipulation. We met at a charity fundraiser for a local literacy program, and our first conversation lasted 3 hours, without either of us realizing how much time had passed. What I appreciate most about Isabel is her straightforward nature. When she says something, I can trust that she means it. When she makes a commitment, she follows through. It sounds simple, but after living with someone who treated truth as a flexible concept, these basic qualities feel revolutionary. We've been together for 8 months now, and I've been completely honest with her about my marriage and divorce. I showed her some of the documentation of Serenity's deceptions, not to justify my own actions, but to help her understand why I sometimes need extra reassurance, and why I pay attention to details that might seem insignificant to others. "You've developed excellent instincts," she told me after I explained how I'd detected Serenity's lies. "The ability to observe carefully and trust your intuition are valuable skills, whether you're analyzing investment portfolios or building personal relationships." She's right, though it took me time to see my experience as something that had taught me valuable lessons, rather than just scarred me emotionally. I'm now someone who asks direct questions and expects honest answers. I verify information that seems questionable, rather than giving people the benefit of the doubt when my instincts are warning me otherwise. Some might call this cynical, but I prefer to think of it as educated wisdom. The legal aftermath of my divorce had one unexpected positive outcome. The documentation I'd gathered of Serenity's healthcare fraud caught the attention of the district attorney's office, and they opened an investigation into her hospital deception. While she ultimately received only probation and community service, the case established legal precedent for prosecuting fake pregnancy and miscarriage claims when they're used to defraud individuals or institutions. I've since been contacted by 3 other men, whose wives or girlfriends had used similar deceptions to manipulate them emotionally or financially. In each case, I was able to provide guidance about documentation and legal options that help them protect themselves and seek appropriate remedies. Last month, I received an unexpected phone call from Lucian Theros. He's doing well in Portland, working as the creative director for a sustainable clothing company, and engaged to a woman he describes as everything Serenity pretended to be prime, genuine, and incapable of manipulation. "I wanted to thank you," he said during our conversation, "for not destroying my reputation when you could have, for recognizing that I was manipulated too, even though I made terrible choices based on those manipulations." We talked for over an hour about the experience we'd both lived through, and I realized that harboring anger toward him had been preventing me from fully moving forward. He'd been young, naive, and targeted by someone who specialized in emotional manipulation. While his actions had consequences, his intentions weren't malicious in the way Serenity's had been. As for Serenity herself, I occasionally hear updates through our former mutual friends. She's apparently struggling to rebuild her professional reputation, moving from job to job, as word of her personal scandals continues to follow her. Several people have told me she's attempted to reach out to them with revised versions of our story, painting herself as the victim of an abusive marriage, who was forced to lie for her own protection. I no longer feel anger when I hear these reports, just a kind of sad recognition that she's probably incapable of accepting responsibility for her actions. Some people learn from their mistakes and grow as human beings. Others double down on their worst behaviors and spend their lives blaming external circumstances for the consequences of their choices. The house feels especially peaceful on evenings like this one, when Isabel is working a late shift at the hospital, and I have time to reflect on how dramatically my life has changed. I cook dinner for one, tend to my small garden, and read books that I choose because they interest me, rather than because they'll impress someone else. Tomorrow Isabel and I are driving up to Napa Valley for a long weekend. We've rented a small cabin where we plan to do absolutely nothing except drink good wine, cook simple meals, and enjoy each other's company without any agenda beyond being present in each moment. It's the kind of uncomplicated happiness that I never thought I'd experience again. Not the performance of happiness that I lived through with Serenity, but genuine contentment, built on trust, honesty, and shared values. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not confronting Serenity earlier, if I wish I'd ended the marriage before enduring months of her elaborate deceptions. The answer is no. Watching her perform taught me more about human nature, manipulation, and my own capacity for resilience than any other experience in my life. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, more observant than I realized, and capable of making difficult decisions when my core values are threatened. Most importantly, I discovered that real love meant, the kind I'm building with Isabel, is based on truth rather than illusion. The fog has completely rolled in now, wrapping my neighborhood in the soft gray blanket that makes San Francisco feel like the most intimate city in the world. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, living exactly the life I was meant to live, grateful for every lesson that brought me here. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.